Walrus held the ice dock the way an old, stubborn ship held a berth, by showing up heavy, calm, and impossible to ignore. The ice dock at Nivik Harbour wasn't really a dock in the usual sense. It was a low steel platform set just inside the breakwater where winter sea ice sometimes pressed in close enough to crack against the pilings. In spring and early summer, the platform served a different purpose. It became a staging spot for small tour boats, kayak guides, and the harbour crew who needed a safe place to tie up when the floating docks were crowded. On clear days, it looked almost cheerful. Sun glittering on cold water, tourists in bright jackets, the smell of diesel and coffee mixing with salt air. The mountains beyond the bay were still streaked with snow like someone had dragged white paint down dark rock. And then the Walrus arrived and made the whole place quieter. Sina Arneson noticed first because she always noticed first. Sina worked for the Harbour Authority. Her official title was Operations Coordinator, but in practice she was the person who solved problems before they became loud. She managed dock assignments, watched tide tables, handled the radio chatter that never fully stopped, and mediated the small daily conflicts between fishermen, tour guides, and cargo crews who all believed their schedule was the most important. She was walking the inner docks early one morning with a clipboard and a thermos when she heard a sound that didn't belong. A deep, wet exhale like a bellows, followed by a muffled grumble. At first she thought it was a seal. Harbour seals lounged on floats all the time. But the sound was lower and heavier, like it came from something that didn't have to hurry. She looked toward the ice dock and stopped. Something pale brown lay along the edge of the platform, half in shadow, half in sun. It was big enough that her brain rejected it for a second, like a scale error. Then the shape lifted its head slightly, and she saw the tusks. Walrus. Full-grown, thick through the shoulders, skin wrinkled and damp, whiskers bristling around a blunt face that looked both ancient and annoyed. It wasn't sprawled in a cute way. It was planted, foreflippers folded under, body draped against the cold steel like it had decided this was the best place to rest and nothing else mattered. Sina's first thought was practical and immediate. That's our loading point. Her second thought was quieter. How did you even get there so calmly? The Walrus shifted, a slow roll of mass, and made another low grunt as if answering her question with, "I am where I am." Sina set her clipboard down on a bollard and keyed her radio. "Harbour Ops to station," she said, keeping her voice neutral so it wouldn't spike into everyone's morning like an alarm. Station replied with a crackle. "Go ahead. Ops." "We've got a Walrus hauled out on the ice dock," Sina said. "Large, calm, occupying the platform." There was a pause, long enough that she could hear someone in the office covering the mic to say, "A what?" Then the station voice returned, slightly more awake. "Copy, any immediate risk?" "Not moving much," Sina replied, "but it's right where tour boats tie up." "Understood," the voice said. "Wildlife officer is on call. We'll notify. Advise boats to keep distance." Sina looked around. The harbour was waking. A tour guide was unlocking a storage shed. A fisherman was untying lines on a skiff. In 20 minutes, the first tourist group would show up, and if tourists saw a walrus on a dock, their instincts would be predictable. Photos, excitement, and worst of all, approaching. Sina walked briskly toward the tour shed and found Ilya Petrov pulling life jackets from a rack. Ilya ran Northline Tours, the small company that took visitors out to see seabirds, glaciers, and, if you got lucky, whales. He was good at it because he was patient and he didn't oversell. He didn't promise wildlife, he promised good boat handling and honest scenery. He looked up when he saw Sina's face. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Walrus on the ice dock," Sina said. "Big one, it's hauled out right where you tie up." Ilya blinked once, then his expression went strangely thoughtful, like part of him was delighted and part of him was already calculating lost minutes. "On the dock?" he repeated. "On the dock," Sina confirmed. We need you to load from the floating slips today, and keep your passengers back from the platform. No crowding. Ilya nodded, already reaching for his radio. Copy, he said. We'll switch. I'll brief the guides. Sina walked next to the ice dock but kept a wide distance, using a metal fence post line as an invisible boundary. She didn't want to be the first human to teach the walrus that people were a nuisance. Let it rest. Let it decide to leave on its own. But she also had to prevent the harbour from turning into a viewing party. Within half an hour, the walrus had an audience anyway, not a mob. Naivik wasn't that kind of place, but a loose cluster of early visitors who had spotted it from the parking lot. Bright jackets, cameras, excited whispers. A woman in a red parka pointed and said, "Is that real?" A teenager said, "That thing is huge." A man stepped closer, phone held out like a passport. "It's just sitting there," he said, as if that made it safe. Sina moved between the man and the ice dock, not aggressive, just present. "Please stay back," she said. "That animal is resting. It can move fast if startled." The man frowned. "But it's on the dock," he protested. "Isn't the dock for people?" Sina kept her expression calm. "Today the dock is for the walrus," she said. "We're sharing the harbour. Please keep distance." The walrus lifted its head slightly, whiskers twitching, as if it had heard her voice and decided to confirm who was in charge. Its eyes were small but aware. It didn't look frightened. It looked like it was evaluating. The crowd, seeing the head movement, collectively quieted the way people do when they realize a wild animal is not a statue. The woman in the red parka lowered her voice automatically. Even the teenager stopped narrating. That was the first sign that the walrus was already changing the harbour's mood. Sina posted a temporary barrier line using 2 cones and a length of rope, not because it would physically stop anyone determined, but because it gave respectful people an obvious cue. This is the line. She added a laminated sign from the office supply box. "Wildlife resting. Keep 30 meters distance. Do not approach." It wasn't fancy, it was clear. As the morning progressed, the tour boats adjusted. Normally, Northline tours loaded right at the ice dock because it was low and easy for older passengers. Today, Ilya moved his boat to a floating slip farther down, which meant passengers had to walk a longer ramp. He didn't complain, but Sina could see the tightness in his shoulders as he watched the clock. A second operator, Polar Eye Cruises, arrived with a larger group and immediately tried to argue. Their captain, a man named Kurt, had the kind of confidence that always came with an assumption that rules were negotiable. Kurt strode up to Sina. "We've got 60 people," he said. "We need the ice dock. Our boarding plan is there." Sina pointed toward the walrus without moving her voice. "It's occupied," she said. Kurt scoffed. "It's an animal," he replied, as if stating a fact ended the conversation. Sina met his eyes. "It's a protected animal," she said, "and it's resting. If you try to board near it, you risk a stampede, yours or its. Either way, you're liable, and the harbour authority will shut you down." Kurt's jaw tightened. He looked past her at the walrus again, as if hoping it would suddenly get up and apologize for the inconvenience. It didn't. It exhaled loudly and shifted, pressing its bulk more firmly onto the dock like it was settling in for a longer stay. A dockhand nearby muttered, "It's making itself comfortable." Sina heard him and said quietly, "Good, let it be comfortable, away from us." Kurt muttered something under his breath and walked away to reorganize his loading plan. His group, disappointed at not boarding from the cool walrus dock, followed him like frustrated ducks. Tour boats did what boats always did. They adapted. They used different slips, loaded slower, and added extra staff to guide passengers along the longer walkways. And because everyone was loading farther from the walrus, the harbour stayed calmer. That was the second way the walrus controlled things, by forcing humans to spread out instead of bunching in one convenient spot. Around noon, Wildlife Officer Asha Linden arrived in a bright waterproof jacket with a radio clipped to her shoulder. Asha was local, competent, and not easily impressed. She approached Sina with a nod and immediately scanned the dock with the same careful eyes Sina used. "Big bull," Asha said quietly, watching the tusks. "Healthy, good fat, probably just tired." "Can we move it?" a tourist asked from behind the rope line, unable to help themselves. Asha turned slightly, her voice polite but firm. "No," she said. "We don't move Walrus. We manage people." Sina appreciated that line instantly. It matched her entire approach to harbour operations. You couldn't control the sea, you controlled your behaviour around it. Asha continued, "He'll leave when he's ready. If we crowd him, he might leave abruptly, and that's when injuries happen." Sina asked, "Any chance he's sick or stranded?" Asha shook her head. "No sign of distress," she said. "He hauled out on steel instead of ice because it's stable and dry. Probably chased food in, got tired, found a platform. Walrus do this." Sina watched the animal again. It looked peaceful in a stubborn way, eyes half closed now, breathing slow. It wasn't performing. It wasn't threatening. It was simply resting like it belonged. Asha walked along the rope line, gently reinforcing the boundary with a few words to curious onlookers. She didn't shout. She didn't dramatize. She just made it normal to keep distance. That normality mattered. People behaved better when rules felt like standard practice instead of emergency panic. For the rest of the afternoon, boats kept a respectful buffer. Captains idled wide. Kayak guides rerouted their groups away from the platform. Even fishermen, who could be the most impatient category of human when schedules met tides, kept their engines low and avoided unnecessary passing close to the ice dock. Sina noticed something she hadn't expected. The Walrus was influencing boat traffic beyond its immediate area. On the inner channel, where tour boats usually cut tight corners, they started taking wider arcs. Less wake, less noise, fewer sudden revs. It wasn't a harbour-wide rule. It was a shared instinct. When something huge and wild is nearby, you behave a little more carefully. Late in the day, the tide shifted and a slow current line formed near the dock. The Walrus lifted its head again, sniffed the air, and opened its mouth slightly as if tasting the wind. Its whiskers twitched. Asha leaned closer to Sina and said, "He might go soon." "Or he might stay all night," Sina replied. Asha smiled faintly. "Also possible." A group of tourists asked for one more picture, as if the Walrus owed them closure. Sina kept them behind the rope line anyway. The Walrus didn't need a goodbye ceremony. It needed quiet. As the sun lowered and turned the water copper, the ice dock became a silhouette. The Walrus lay like a small island, tusks catching the last light. Sina stood with her arms folded, listening to the softer harbour sounds. Distant engines, ropes tapping masts, gulls settling. The day had been inconvenient. It had also been, in a strange way, smoother than many busy tourist days, because people had been more careful, less chaotic. One large animal had changed a whole system simply by choosing a place to rest. Walrus held the ice dock. And the tour boats kept distance, not because someone yelled at them, not because the harbour suddenly became strict, but because the presence of a calm, heavy creature reminded everyone of a basic rule that makes shared spaces work. When wildlife claims a spot, you don't argue with it. You reroute, you slow down, and you let it finish being what it is. By the second day, the Walrus wasn't just an animal on a dock. It was a schedule. Sina learned that at 7:05 a.m, when she stepped onto the harbour walkway with her thermos and saw the ice dock from a distance. The same pale bulk, the same tusks, the same relaxed sprawl like someone had parked a small boat there overnight and forgotten to move it. Except nothing about it looked forgotten, it looked deliberately settled. The morning air was colder today. A low fog hugged the water near the breakwater, and the lampposts along the docks made soft halos. The harbour felt muted, the way it did before tourists arrived and before engines started. You could hear small things, water tapping a fender, a rope creaking, a gull shifting on a piling. The walrus exhaled once, loud, like a reminder that it was awake enough to matter. Sina keyed her radio. "Ops to station," she said. Station replied quickly now. They were ready for the topic. "Go ahead." "Walrus still on ice dock," Sina said. "Second morning. Calm, occupying full boarding edge." "Copy," Station answered. "Wildlife officer notified. Continue distance protocol." Sina looked toward the tour sheds. She could already imagine the questions. Is it still there? Can we get closer? Can we board there anyway? She made her decision before anyone asked. Today, they weren't improvising. Today, the ice dock would be officially closed for boarding. She walked to the storage box, pulled out the heavier portable barriers, not just cones, but metal A-frame barricades, and placed them at the approach points with clear signs. Ice dock closed. Wildlife resting. Use floating slips for boarding. No approaching or photos from inside barrier. She added a second rope line farther back, creating a bigger buffer. Not because the walrus was suddenly dangerous, but because people's curiosity grew as soon as something became known. Ilya arrived with his guides and took one look at the barriers. "Good," he said simply. "Makes it easier to enforce." Sina nodded. "We can't do another day of negotiations," she replied. Ilya's youngest guide, Freya, glanced at the walrus with wide eyes. "It's still here," she said, half in awe. "It might stay," Signa replied. "So we act like it will." At 8:30, the first tour group arrived. 20 people in bright jackets, moving like a flock, voices echoing off metal and water. The moment they saw the walrus, the whole group slowed as if someone had pressed a button. "Oh my," a woman began. "Is that real?" someone else said. Cameras rose. Sina stepped forward with her calm harbour voice, practiced and clear. "Good morning, everyone," she said. "You can view from behind the barrier. Please do not approach the ice dock. We're giving the walrus space to rest." A man near the front asked, "How close can we go?" Sina pointed to the barrier line. "This is the close," she said. 30 meters. The man frowned. "But it's on the dock." He repeated the same argument as yesterday, like people shared a script. Sina didn't get irritated. She just stayed factual. "The dock will be here all season," she said. "The walrus is here until it decides to leave. We don't pressure it. That's safer for everyone." The group murmured, disappointed but compliant. Most people, when given a clear boundary and a calm explanation, behaved like decent humans. It was the handful who tested rules that created trouble. And trouble arrived right on schedule in the form of Polar cruises. Captain Kurt came striding down the walkway with his clipboard like a weapon. Behind him, 2 deckhands pushed a rolling bin of life jackets. The boat's passengers were already gathering, and Kurt's body language said he planned to board from the ice dock anyway, barriers or not. He stopped in front of Sina. "We can't keep using the floating slips," he said, voice tight. "It's slowing us down. Our passengers are older. The ramp is steep." Sina nodded once. She wasn't unsympathetic, but sympathy didn't move a walrus. "Then you adjust your operation," she said. "Add staff, slow your boarding, or reduce capacity. You do not board next to a walrus." Kurt's jaw tightened. "It's not moving," he said. "So what? We shut down for a week?" Sina kept her tone steady. "If you can't operate safely, yes," she replied. "But you can operate. Others are." Kurt glanced toward the walrus as if hoping it would get up and settle the dispute. The walrus did what it had been doing all morning. Nothing. It lifted its head slightly, whiskers twitching, then set it back down. Kurt exhaled hard. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Sina didn't argue. She pointed to the posted harbour notice. "This is policy when protected wildlife hauls out on infrastructure," she said. "If you cross the barrier, you're violating harbour authority rules. We'll call enforcement." For a long second, Kurt stared at her. Then he made the smartest choice he could make while still angry. He turned away and began shouting quiet instructions to his crew about using Slip C. Sina watched him go and felt a familiar, tired satisfaction. Not victory, just stability. Around mid-morning, Asher Linden returned, scanning the dock line. She stopped beside Sina and watched the Walrus for a while without speaking. "Still calm," Asher said finally. Sina nodded. "He's becoming a landmark," she replied. Asher sighed softly. "That's the risk," she said. "Landmark turns into attraction." They walked the perimeter together, gently reminding people not to cross the barrier, not to lean out over the water for a closer photo, not to toss anything. Asher's voice had the calm authority of someone who didn't need to threaten. Most people listened. Then the Walrus did something that made Sina's heart jump even though it wasn't dangerous. It shifted, not a small adjustment. A full body heave, flippers pushing, torso rolling, skin folding in thick wrinkles. The dock creaked under the movement. Water splashed as one side of its body slid closer to the edge. People gasped. A woman whispered, "Is it going to fall in?" Asher raised a hand. "Stay back," she said, calm but firm. The Walrus lifted its head, opened its mouth slightly, and made a low, rumbling sound. Not a threat exactly, more like a complaint that the dock was hard and humans were noisy. Then, slowly, it scooted forward another few inches and lowered its front half closer to the water as if testing the temperature. Sina held her breath, because if it decided to return to the water right now, the worst thing that could happen was people rushing to the edge for a departure shot. That kind of surge could lead to someone slipping, falling, or, worst of all, an animal feeling cornered. But the Walrus didn't leave. It simply found a more comfortable position and settled again, tusks angled outward like ivory anchors. The crowd exhaled in collective disappointment. Asher leaned closer to Sina. "He's tired," she said. "He hauled out for rest, not for drama." Sina nodded. "Tell that to tourists," she murmured. After lunch, the harbour settled into the new routine. Boat operators used alternate slips. Kayak tours started farther down the channel. The ice dock became a closed zone, watched and respected. And something unexpected happened. The tours actually improved. Without boarding chaos at the ice dock, there were fewer snarls of people in one narrow spot. Guides had more time to do proper safety briefings. Passengers moved slower and more carefully. The whole harbour felt less rushed. Ilya noticed too. He said to Sina quietly, "My group was calmer today." They got their photo from the barrier, then they focused on the tour. Sina smiled faintly. "Maybe the Walrus is better at crowd control than we are," she said. Late afternoon brought a shift in weather. Wind picked up slightly and pushed fog back toward the bay mouth. The light changed. Water darkened. Sina watched the Walrus closely then, because animals often timed movements with tide and light. If it was going to leave, it might choose the quieter part of the day. Asher checked the tide chart and said, "High tide in an hour. If he wants to slide off, it'll be easier then." Sina nodded, keeping the barrier line intact. "We'll keep people back until closing," she said. As high tide approached, the Walrus lifted its head again and sniffed the air. It shuffled, placing its weight closer to the edge. One flipper dipped briefly into the water like a test. Sina's pulse quickened. She signalled a dockhand to stand near the barrier and discourage anyone from pushing forward. Asher raised her radio slightly, ready to coordinate if the animal entered the water near boat lanes. The Walrus paused. Then, with surprising smoothness for something so big, it slid. Its body moved forward, belly meeting water, tusks briefly catching the light, and then the whole animal slipped off the steel platform into the sea with a thick, controlled splash that sent ripples across the harbour. For a second, everyone was silent. Then the Walrus surfaced nearby, snorted, and began swimming along the breakwater line, moving away from docks and boats as if it already knew the safe route out. Tourists lifted phones again, but the barrier kept them from crowding the edge. They filmed from a distance, and the Walrus kept its dignity. No people looming over it, no one leaning close. Asha exhaled. "Good exit," she said. Sina watched the dark shape fade into the water beyond the last floats and felt the harbour loosen, like a knot untied. She kept the ice dock closed anyway for the rest of the evening, because she'd learned the deeper rule of days like this. You didn't reopen the moment wildlife left. You let calm settle, you let habits hold. Walrus held the ice dock for 2 full days, not as a performance, but as a simple need, rest on a stable platform. And the tourboats kept distance because the harbour chose discipline over convenience, proving a realistic lesson that applied to every working waterfront. When the wild shows up, you don't force it to move. You adjust your human schedule until the ocean decides the timing again,